Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jaci. I'm the Star Trek newbie who just treks off on tangents.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who is here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode. And this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 9, Dagger of the Mind.
And welcome back to our little podcast project. Thank you all so much for listening in and tuning in, however you choose to consume the podcast, whether that's on our Patreon, our website, or one of the other major podcast distribution platforms like YouTube or Spotify. We appreciate you tuning back in for another episode.
It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So if you have the opportunity, if you could...
check out the Patreon. You're missing out there.
Besides listening, greatly supporting our podcast, besides liking and subscribing wherever you choose to do so, sharing the podcast with a friend is, I think, the most beneficial and helpful thing to the podcast that we can have. If you know someone who likes Star Trek, if you know someone who likes sci-fi, if you know someone who doesn't like Star Trek or likes sci-fi, and thinks it's entertaining to listen to someone else who doesn't know Star Trek or sci-fi, feel free to share the latest episode, send them our link. We always are happy to welcome new people into the audience. As we mentioned in the last episode, expanding on our offerings to our Patreon subscribers, which you can find us at patreon.com/treks and tangents. We are going to start launching monthly a little bonus episode where we listen to and talk about the Star Trek original series animated series that came out after the original series stopped airing on television. They produced an animated version that lasted a decent number of episodes. So that is going to launch. The first episode will launch on our Patreon on Friday, December 26th. And
we're perfect Christmas gift.
A little post-Christmas listen, get away from the family. If you're visiting relatives, duck away for a period of time and listen to us if you want. We plan on releasing these bonus episodes on the fourth Friday of every month until we run out of animated series and we'll find something else to do. But they're only going to be available to our Patreon subscribers. They will not be found on the other podcast streaming platforms to listen. You just have to visit patreon.com/treks and tangents and sign up to be a crew member of the podcast. Greatly appreciate your support. Thank you so much for considering joining our crew. But with that being said, let's just jump into this week's episode. We ended last week's episode, as we always do, by giving a turbolift tease or elevator pitch. This was where we had Jaci give her best estimate to what the plot of this week's episode would be with just the title of the episode. And I happen to have that right here. Jaci's prediction was more narrow-focused this week than it has been.
I'm doing much better.
And so Jaci's turbolift tease was, and I quote, "That means we are going to have a character that has like a brain tumor, and that, is a metaphor for that dagger or vice versa. And we have to cure them and make them happy."
I get like a bronze star.
A bronze star. You're still making very vague predictions. A metaphor for the dagger, or the other way around, it's a metaphor for not the dagger.
I'm just like Shakespeare. I got all the words.
You're just hedging your bets. But I'll give you a bronze star for this week.
Boom.
What did you think of this week's episode, Jaci?
I liked it, actually. I didn't even realize it was 50 minutes long. 50. It felt like 15. It just was flying on by. But I do need them to work on the ladies' uniforms because Miss Helen definitely needed to be wearing longer pants.
I was probably going to point that out too when we got to it, but I agree as well. The pacing for this episode was fantastic, I thought. This definitely is an episode that doesn't drag out. It doesn't really have any spots during the plot where you feel like things are dragging or things are being drawn out to fill time. They definitely make great use of the 50 minutes for the episode.
And back to Helen, though, if you have a problem when things are not, equal, beware. She has one curl that is not pinned. It's just hanging there. Like, weird.
Yeah, an interesting fashion choice or style choice by the hairstylist. So, enough about our initial impressions. We're trying to shorten this period of the podcast up so that we can get to the meat of the podcast. Jackie, why don't you walk us through the episode?
So this time, instead of starting at the bridge, we start in the transport room with two crew members who are trying to send 5 giant pieces of medical and aid to this penal colony. I'm assuming it's like a jail of some sort.
Right. The opening shot of the show, of the episode, is of this giant container of infrasensory drugs. It said from the Tantalus penal colony, but they're beaming it down. Who knows? It's a giant container full of drugs. But yes, this is, in a sense, a prison or jail for individuals. They don't go into super detail, but this is a type of jail where people with mental disabilities who have violent tendencies, so these would be medical conditions like schizophrenia or other types of conditions that would lead someone to violence. It's a jail for criminals who have committed crimes, but rather than locking them in a jail cell or a holding cell, this penal colony is staffed by doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, psychoanalysis equipment. And in one sense, they're doing treatment. In another sense, they're doing experiments and research. This is less of a penal colony and more of a hospital, but you don't get to check out when you want to.
Huh, really? So they cannot send, for some reason, our two crew member cannot get these items to ship. And then, of course, Kirk walks in. He's like, having a problem, gentlemen. And all he has to do is ask for permission to have those little force field shields open so we can send down all this medicine and aid that you need. And then you can put it back up. But we can't come through some invisible wall.
Yeah, it's a force field that the penal colony has enacted over its facilities to prevent
Right.
transporters. It doesn't seem to affect communication. Well, I take that back. It
Mhm.
later affects communication. They have to have some kind of monitoring system for outside people to ping in. So, like,
Maybe it's like a doorbell.
yeah, they've got someone monitoring some doorbell frequency, but we later find out, or we later see, that when Kirk tries to reach the Enterprise with his own communicator, the same force field blocks that communication. It's a security measure because, again, this isn't a hospital. This is a colony that is incarcerating individuals who have committed various amounts of crime, and not petty crimes, violent crime.
So Kirk gets everything open. The 5 boxes and medicine are shipped down. And then, oh, the planet has to come back up from Dr. Adams. Sure. Okay, send it on up. So we receive this giant box and it's just sitting there.
Yeah, it's supposed to be research data, and it has to be tapes because the computer runs on the Enterprise on tapes. Every time they access files and information, they're referring to tapes. This would have to be in reference to what technology is in the 60s, where all data is stored on tapes. So these have to be just reels and reels of data tapes.
Yes, like for last episode, I imagined that all these tapes were like those microfiche things that we looked at the library in high school or even in college.
Yeah.
Just, everything smushed, but with tons of data.
Yep. Pretty
And
much the same thing.
so, of course, the box is supposed to be just the tapes hanging out there. And Kirk reminds we only know one of these crew members' name, which is Berkeley, because Kirk calls him out and says, you have to follow protocol and secure it and
He's
relearn your thing.
he
But of course, secure this box first.
Yeah, Kirk's calling out the crew member for not remembering on his own that a penal colony would have a force field that they would need to request to be lowered. So, something that he should know. Kirk is acting in his role of captain to tell him you need to go re-review your information and do some remedial training, but he's not harping on it. He's definitely just kind of ribbing on him and giving him a little bit of a hard time.
But of course, they all have their backs turned. Their backs are turned. Out of the box creeps this creepy dude in a blue jumpsuit and black boots. And he's like a little acrobat person, just super, super quiet and gets out. And then he just waits for Captain to leave and knocks out our dear friend Berkeley. And so Kirk's gone, and we have a knocked out Berkeley. So this wild looking person tries to leave, but he can't go out of the transport room because the hallway is filled with people. We never see the hallway ever filled, but of course, at this one time, they're they all must be walking to lunch. Who knows?
Yes.
So he then hides again. After the opening credits, we're on the bridge, and Kirk and McCoy are just chatting about how it would have been nice to meet Dr. Adams.
Well, Kirk is more interested in meeting Dr. Adams. Dr. McCoy really doesn't have any desire to meet Dr. Adams. He doesn't have the same opinion.
Right, like Kirk is like, oh, this man is a god.
Kirk definitely idolizes Dr. Adams and the work that Dr. Adams does. McCoy definitely has a more negative opinion of Dr. Adams, his work, the penal colony in general, and what it stands for.
I mean, Dr. McCoy even brought up that it was like a cage, but then Kirk bounces back that it's just like a resort. They're all okay, getting their therapy that they need.
Right.
Harmless, even though all the violent people are there. And as they're chatting, we are interrupted though because a woman's voice pops up and you hear a transfer, pushes out the transmission, for lack of a better term, that they're missing an inmate and he is violent and to be aware. Of course, they don't say who this inmate is. I think they're almost ashamed. At that point, I thought they were ashamed of who it was because, like, we lost someone. Oops.
Right.
So while this is all happening on the bridge, we do see in the transporter room that the stowaway has changed into the red engineering transporter outfit that the gentleman that he knocked out was wearing.
Yeah, he's going to try to blend into the crew, see how long he can evade detection.
Not very long.
No, well, he has no idea that the penal colony is aware that he's missing and that the penal colony has reached out to the Enterprise.
And then we jump to the bridge. Everything, so we have to keep on where everything is happening because jumping again. They're on the bridge. Back on the bridge, Uhura relays that the person missing must have beamed up in the box with the tapes. So he may be on the Enterprise. And so this is when the Enterprise goes to alert conditions 3. They're keeping their eye on open looking for this intruder.
Yeah, for layman's terms, because they haven't fully established Starfleet protocol or ship protocol at this point in the Star Trek series, this is just called Red Alert.
All of these alert numbers are so crazy. Well, that's happened. Then we're back in the hallways of said Enterprise, and the intruder is spotted in that red jumpsuit from from Berkeley's friend by another person in a red shirt.
He's in a
And
gold shirt.
that's right. And he's like, "Hey, you in the engineering outfit, stop." But our intruder does not stop. As he's running away, the gentleman in the gold shirt uses the little intercom and reports to the bridge to Spock that he got away and he's at large. And in turn, Spock blocks off deck 14 to try to hopefully contain him in at least one spot.
Right, because they've discovered the transporter crew member is unconscious, same deck, 14. They have this other crew member reporting that he spotted this suspicious person, again, deck 14. So they're trying to contain him to deck 14. So Spock sends the security crew down to try to apprehend him on deck 14.
And as the security crew is looking for him, he comes up behind one of them and knocks him out and takes his phaser from him.
Yep, because apparently this guy is a ninja and has got
a good chop.
A fantastic ability to sneak up behind anyone and just knock them out with one swift karate chop to the neck.
And wild, wild eyes.
Yes.
And then we also hear from Uhura that they have more of a description. He's roughly early 40s, 6'4", approach with caution. But he didn't seem 6'4" by watching the TV, but we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Or early 40s at that.
I don't know. He seemed like he might be in his early 40s.
Well, as he's running around with his phaser and trying to get away, we're back on the bridge. And since they haven't found him on deck 14, Spock has already expanded to another block. Let's keep trying to look for him.
Yes.
And the Tantalus still hasn't returned the Enterprise's call for more information. And finally, Kirk contacts them.
Yeah, Kirk wants to speak directly to Dr. Adams because I think Kirk's suspicions are starting to raise a little bit. Certainly, we know McCoy's suspicions are off the charts, but I think Kirk, from a procedural standpoint, is more concerned with just how does this happen. So he wants to talk directly to Dr. Adams, who is in charge of this penal colony, the warden of McCoy's jail.
And well, they're talking. Uhura does get confirmation that the inmate is aboard. The box that he came in is open. They found the crew member who got knocked out, but while Kirk is talking to Dr. Adams, it was more like oops, I'm sorry that happened. It's like your problem now. He was very nonchalant about the whole thing.
Yeah, he does ask later. He does show a little bit of concern toward the Enterprise crew and asking if there's any fatalities or if anyone's hurt. He's very agreeable, I will say, throughout the episode until he's called to the carpet at the end.
We also have a security crew person come and just stand at the bridge door, just standing there.
Yeah.
Like a filler.
Let's talk about this idiot security man. This version of the Enterprise, there is only one turbolift onto and off of the bridge, the one at the very back of the bridge. There's no other turbolift. And he walks in and he immediately plants his back facing that door. And he's watching all of the bridge members. He's not watching the turbolift. He's not guarding against anyone because all of a sudden the strange man pops into the turbolift, exits the bridge. The security guy doesn't turn around to see who it is and instantly gets knocked out and subdued by this crazy intruder.
After he knocks him out, he's like, "Where's the captain? Who's the captain?" Over and over again. And then finally, Kirk's like, "Hey, it's me." And the intruder insists on these crazy things at gunpoint, phaser point. And Kirk's like, "You're not going to get anything while you're pointing that at me, so why don't you put it down?" He's actually asking for asylum so he doesn't have to go back to that planet.
Yeah, very, very hauntingly throwing back to Charlie X at the end, where Charlie is begging not to be sent back to the planet with the rest of them. A little bit different tone, but same feeling, I don't want to go back to that hellish place.
And Kirk's like, no promises, but please hand me that phaser. And then the intruder's like, I'm going to destroy this ship again if you don't listen to my demands.
And at some point in all of this back and forth, Kirk is asking him who he is and trying to get him to identify. And that's when he says his name is Van Gelder. But as he says his name is Van Gelder, he seems like he's in. It's almost like it's hurting him to say his own name. We'll find out later why. But he is able to blurt out and get out that his name is Van Gelder.
Well, Kirk is distracting Van Gelder. We see Spock come around and do his very funky Vulcan grip. And then down he goes. And they take him to sickbay. Or hopefully they get more information from him. He's unable to go directly back to the planet because they're already on their way away from it. So they need to change course to go back.
Right.
And give him back to Dr. Adams.
Right, because sometime in all of this, after he's been beamed up, they depart the colony. The guy gets knocked out. There has to be a period of time. The missing time has to be when Van Gelder is in the transporter room after he's knocked out the crewman as he's changing into the other clothing. There has to be some period of time where they were alone for the Enterprise to get some distance away from the colony.
McCoy and Kirk are in the sick bay with Van Gelder. They have to fight to put him on the bed, and they are measuring his levels and to see what's up with any weird diagnoses that Dr. Adams kept talking about, how this person is so violent and whatnot.
And in this early part of the scene, McCoy is reporting back to Kirk that all of Van Gelder's vitals are off, that he's sedated, but he's heavily sedated. He had to be over sedated to keep him calm.
3 times as much.
Right. He has to be overly medicated in order to have him even be as calm as he is, but he's still clearly agitated as he's strapped down on the sickbay table.
And McCoy does rule out schizophrenia, but he seemed almost giddy at times. He's like, I really want to study this one. And Kirk does not agree, obviously. But Van Gelder is still trying to communicate, trying to tell them what happened. But he can't, because we will learn later exactly what has happened. And so they just sedate him again when he gets too agitated.
Yeah, Kirk's trying to question him, and he's asking him what his name is, and he's able to say that he's Van Gelder. And he does also reveal in and amongst, obviously he's in pain as he's trying to talk and recall this information, but he's able to reveal to Kirk that he was the director of the colony.
Yes, he was important, and this is not right. It's just watching him go back and forth and then laughing and then fighting and being able to spurt it out. It kind of tugs at you also.
Yeah, and I think the writers are trying to continue to portray and prolong the mystery. It's definitely starting to become obvious that he's no ordinary inmate, that there is something afoot. There is something different about him, but they still want to not reveal the entire plot at this point, so they are keeping the cards close to their chest and still giving him characteristics that would make someone question, is he an inmate of the colony? Is he not an inmate?
Exactly. And still, all of this is still happening, but we're back at the bridge. And we see back on the bridge, Kirk asks, where are we? And Spock replies they're roughly 57 minutes away from the planet. And he's so intrigued looking at what I called microfiche, these little videotapes. And he's like, there's a real dude named Simon Van Gelder. He's like, this is legit.
A Dr. Simon Van Gelder.
Yes. And it's like, a doctor? Yes, a doctor. And Kirk wants to know, why was he committed? When was he committed? What did he do? This is a quote unquote bad place. But Spock corrects him and says, no, no, no. He was assigned there 6 months ago as an assistant, an associate for
Yeah.
Dr. Adams.
Yeah, important distinction. It was associate of Dr. Adams, not an assistant. So it's interesting because a scene ago in the sickbay, Van Gelder says that he was the director of the colony, but then I think Dr. Adams is the director. I think Van Gelder was an associate there doing co-research and maybe was equal as far as scientific researcher to Dr. Adams, but Dr. Adams definitely has administrative authority over the colony. I would write off that line that Van Gelder says he's the director as more of just his general confusion. He's trying to warn them about the director of the colony, less so much try to claim that he is the director.
That makes really good sense, especially since he's barely getting words out that mean something.
Right.
So finally, Kirk is able to reach out to Dr. Adams on the colony. And again, like, how is he able to get a hold of them if their force is always on?
Yeah, it has to be some sort of technology where because we see the communicator that doesn't work is the communicator that Kirk is holding. So the force field, if I had to hazard a guess, they have their comm system and they have an antenna that is stationed outside of the force field. This is probably also the doorbell that we referred to.
Walkie-talkie.
Where they send the message down, it's picked up by the antenna, and then the antenna sends it down through a wire through the force field to a communications set of equipment where they can hear them. Kirk's communicator is not set up to that comm system and antenna. It has its own antenna that's being blocked because it's inside the force field. And this has been Ham Radio Star Trek with Brian.
So we also got a little bit more information on why we're supposed to be aware of Dr. Van Gelder, or why is he so violent and whatnot. Dr. Adams discussed that he was wanted to try a new experiment or treatment, but he wouldn't do it on any of the patients before he tried it on himself.
Right. It's important to note that in and amongst this conversation, as Kirk is getting this information from Dr. Adams over the communication system, Dr. McCoy enters the bridge. So Dr. McCoy is there listening in and observing all of this information in this conversation. Dr. Adams doesn't know that McCoy is there because it's over radio. There's no visual.
And Dr. McCoy greatly disagrees. Something fishy is up. This isn't just a tiny treatment going awry.
Right, but he doesn't object directly to Dr. Adams. He whispers in Kirk's ear that something doesn't seem right. Yes. And so Kirk puts Dr. Adams on hold to converse with McCoy privately. But again, that conversation is very similar to before. Dr. McCoy is very skeptical of Dr. Adams and doesn't believe what he's saying. Kirk relies more on Dr. Adams' reputation and sticks up for Dr. Adams and tries to alleviate or dismiss McCoy's concerns.
Spock interrupts the two and wants them to ask Dr. Adams, what do you want us to do? I mean,
what do you want us to do with Van Gelder?
Yes. Not like hopscotch or anything. What do you want us to do with this inmate of yours, you say? And Dr. Adams is like, well, take him to the best hospital around. And then, but Kirk's like, wouldn't that be yours?
Well, no. McCoy, upon hearing that Dr. Adams wants Van Gelder dropped off at the best hospital in whatever direction and whatever the normal route of the Enterprise is, it's McCoy who raises his suspicions again to Kirk by saying this penal colony is the best place for Van Gelder. There's no other penal colony or hospital that is better to treat him, and Dr. Adams knows this. So again, this is evidence and proof that Dr. Adams is trying to get Van Gelder away from the colony. Basically, I think the motivation of Van Gelder is he's off the colony, he's out of sight, out of mind. Get him to a hospital where they're just going to overly sedate him and dismiss his ramblings as that of a crazy person. And then Dr. Adams' experiments and all of his little shady dealings with the inmates at the colony will continue to go unnoticed. It might even be that Dr. Adams indirectly could have helped Van Gelder escape.
Kirk and McCoy continue to argue back and forth about what to do with Van Gelder.
Well, and McCoy is still suspicious of Dr. Adams and everything that's going on, and the argument stems from Kirk continues to defend Dr. Adams and dismiss McCoy's suspicions.
Exactly. And then he uses that suspicion and throws it in McCoy's face. And it's like, all right, then put it in your report too. Thus making Kirk have to make another report.
Right. McCoy is basically employing some procedural loophole or procedure where he's using his medical log that he's required to keep as part of the mission to spell out his suspicions and objections. This procedurally triggers a necessary response from Kirk in his log, and Kirk has to alleviate this suspicion and document why McCoy's suspicions are not valid. And the only real way to do that is to investigate his suspicions.
And so Kirk decides, with permission, of course, from Dr. Adams, that he will come down with his crew and do that investigation. But Dr. Adams says, why don't you just, keep that crew to a minimum?
Right, because Dr. Adams, well, as we know, Dr. Adams doesn't want a lot of witnesses, but the official reason is we're still a penal colony. We still have our patients are convicted criminals, and we want to limit contact with the outside world. So only bring down the absolute minimum crew that you need to complete this investigation. But while Kirk is apologetic to having to conduct this investigation, Adams takes it in stride and in fact says he welcomes the investigation because it'll help put the whole matter to rest. Again, Adams is extremely agreeable and is doing everything he can to cooperate. I think less to convince people that he's right and more to say, there's nothing here to investigate, now leave.
Exactly my thoughts too. Like, just nothing to see here. So Kirk decides that he will go down, beam down, and he puts it on McCoy to find a proper assistant to go with him who knows about psychology and the medical field. Like, good luck with that. It was kind of like a challenge.
Yeah, specifically someone who has psychiatric medical experience and knowledge about penal colonies.
Two very specific things.
Yeah, and he is definitely challenging McCoy to say, this is your objection. You better figure it out so that I can investigate it. You're the one who put me on notice.
And then the little evil smile McCoy has, I'm all about that. The Enterprise has returned to the colony, and McCoy tells Kirk that he has found the perfect assistant.
And McCoy already has the assistant meeting Kirk in the transporter room. They're ready to go.
Spock and Kirk go to the transporter room where that assistant is already waiting for them.
And the assistant is Dr. Helen Noel. I think McCoy tells Kirk that before they go to the transporter room.
Yes, but they only use Dr. Noel. So I think it's kind of funny when they walk in and it's this beautiful woman. And when Kirk pops onto the transport platform to beam with her, they have like this little chit chat about Christmas party in the past. It's like, all right, let's be professional now.
Yes, they clearly know each other, and there was clearly some kind of interaction at a science lab Christmas party.
Kirk even tells Spock to tell McCoy that this had better be the best assistant and best choice to go with him to the colony. Kirk and Dr. Helen beam to the Tantalus V, where they are on this elevator that is not fancy like theirs, and it's so rickety. Kirk actually like grabs Helen
Well, it's not
in the
necessarily
opposite way.
it's not necessarily rickety. It's just that as soon as it starts to move, it moves incredibly fast and catches them off guard.
They arrive at the bottom of the elevator, and Dr. Adams is there to greet him, both of them. Kirk tries to surrender his phaser, safety first, and Dr. Adams says, no, just keep it. We're okay.
Again, super agreeable.
Yeah, like, are we sure that this is a prison?
Are we sure that the people in the prison pose any danger? Or is Dr. Adams so convinced that everyone on the colony is either incredibly loyal to him or incredibly brainwashed and unable to rebel against him?
And they all introduce themselves, and then Helen makes a joke about her being called Doctor because, Kirk's just been calling her Helen all this time. But so, as they keep going, Dr. Adams wants to do a toast with them. But before they can do that toast, Kirk wants to check in with the Enterprise to make sure they know that they've arrived safely. He tries, and he can't get through. So Dr. Adams is like, "Oh, let me turn down our force field and let you get through to the Enterprise so you guys can check in." And after the check-in, they go back to focusing on talking about the planet and Dr. Van Gilder when in comes Leafy. We learn that she was a former inmate and now she's a therapist.
Yeah, her treatment has apparently gone so well that after she's received whatever treatment she had to receive, she's willingly stayed on as a therapist.
And they even ask, what did you do beforehand? What was wrong? Why were you bad? And she's like, why is that so important? And everything she says, blank affect. No smile, glimmer, anything.
There's also a little bit of foreshadowing. Dr. Adams breaks in to the conversation to explain to Kirk that as part of their treatment and therapy sessions and everything else, they suppress or erase the memories of their past. Dr. Adams is trying to portray that this is helpful for the therapy. I think this is just a side effect of this machine that we're going to be introduced to in a little bit.
And then finally, he gets his toast, and he has this great toast with all smiles, and Lethe is still flat as a board.
Yeah, he's very poetic with his toast, and Lethe, we'll use that pronunciation, doesn't participate in the toast, doesn't have any of the alcohol. I assume it's alcohol they're toasting with. They don't actually say what they're drinking.
They're able to take a tour now with Lethe, of course, and Kirk notices a space, and he's asking about it, and Dr. Adams goes on about how it was a failed experiment, no need to check that. But Kirk is still interested. And then Helen supports Dr. Adams and saying, no, we don't need to look at any of the failed things. Let's be positive.
Right. Because Adams says it's not only a failure, but it serves no scientific purpose. And that's kind of what Dr. Helen focuses on is, well, if there's no scientific value to this, we don't need to look any further. She's focused very much on the science of everything, as I think her role is as the assistant, but Kirk needs to dig deeper, and Kirk knows that.
Exactly. And even though he's saying one thing, his body is almost like too giddy, like Duper's delight, like ha ha ha. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise in the sick bay, Dr. Van Gilder is still fidgeting. He's still agitated. He's still fighting. He is trying to communicate, but it's not really communication. He is telling them he's not a criminal he is able to, spit out the words neural and neutralizer, light, all these broken, all these words in like a broken sentence. And they still have Dr. McCoy and Spock still are unable to put the pieces together, but they know that something is wrong.
Well, they know something's wrong, but they still decide to sedate Van Gelder at this point again.
And I was surprised Spock was all about, yeah, poke him, poke him.
Yeah, give him the drugs.
And then, like I said, we're going back and forth a lot again. This kind of format frustrates me because I miss things. So bear with me. They come across a room with a chair. An inmate is in a chair looking up.
Well, this would be the room that they were standing outside of just 2 scenes prior.
Exactly, the failed experiment.
That had no scientific value.
And then he even uses the words neutralizer.
That's how he introduces the machine.
And the light is at the very top in the ceiling, and the subject lays down in the chair staring at it. And it's just, super simple. These easy to use. There's another employee, very still flat effect. I didn't grab his name.
I don't think we get a name for that. No, we do. We do get a name for that guy. I just went back and looked it up. The assistant who's operating the neural neutralizer on the unnamed patient is simply named Eli.
Thank you very much. So we have Lethe and Eli.
Right.
Interesting. And again, no affect. Flat face, no emotion, just doing monotone. And so they just use the unknown subject as an example. These little knobs on this weird mechanical board just increases intensity, turns it off, turns it on, done. But we don't know if it works. It's just we have hope, and on to the next.
Well, and it's interesting that here we see that they're using it on a patient, but just prior it was described by Dr. Adams as a failed experiment and having no scientific value. Dr. Adams has to quickly backpedal and try to say that, yes, we can say that it doesn't do anything, but we have hope in more extreme, more violent cases and more violent patients that it does something. So they're literally just experimenting on a patient using a machine and a procedure that has no scientific value. This, I think, should have been a warning to Dr. Helen Noel that something was afoot, but she continues to side with Dr. Adams. But of course, we also know that this machine does do something significant. They know exactly what it does.
And this is also when we learn that this is the machine that injured Dr. Van Gelder. He was all by himself. He was playing with the dials, and he didn't have a backup person to help him. And for some reason, this is what happened to him. And now he's not the same old Simon Van Gelder.
Yep.
And so Kirk, Adams, and Helen and Lethe, they all leave, but Eli stays with the unknown man in the room, and he dials everything up, telling him, you don't remember a thing that just happened. And if you do try to remember, agony, it's going to be very painful.
Yep. Our first real indication that this machine is just brainwashing people.
It reminds me of the lady at the state fair that, does all the hypnosis. So now Spock is able to contact Kirk, but we don't ever hear about the force field going down.
No, I think we've established as the viewer, or the show has established for the viewer, that the force field has to be brought down. And we just have to have the assumption that off camera, Kirk had the same conversation with Dr. Adams. I need to check in with my ship again. Please lower the force field. And of course, Dr. Adams, being so agreeable, has already lowered the force field when this conversation has started.
Yes. And verifies that they're safe and sound. They're in his study, and Spock is quiet, kind of like, hint, are you alone?
Well, before this, Spock and McCoy try to report to Kirk that they've learned about the neural neutralizer from Dr. Van Gelder, and Kirk gets to have the moment where he gets to be smug and know-it-all back in Dr. McCoy's face and says, I already know all about it. I've already seen it. It's nothing. But you're right. Then Spock kind of wants to make sure that Kirk is free to speak his mind without any influence. And Adams picks up on Spock's hint and says, clearly he wants to make sure that you're alone and no one's eavesdropping. I'll go busy myself with something else out of the room. Feel free to talk with him.
And then, so this is when Spock says Van Gilder says that they're in danger. And they're like, we're just going to stay. Everything will be fine. And you can see Dr. Van Gilder, like, his body screams no. That, again, reiterates that they're in danger. But Helen is not convinced. She's like, there's nothing wrong. He just has neural synapse damage. Like, everything isn't clicking right in his brain. But we all know that that is not true. Dr. Van Gelder is certain that Dr. Adams will indeed destroy Kirk and Helen while they're down there, just overnight.
Right.
As second in command, Spock makes his captain the Enterprise log entry about having to do a special Vulcan mind trick on his.
Literally the introductions of this, so we'll get it right. This is the Vulcan Mind Meld.
Oh, the meld.
This is not a Jedi mind trick. This is a Vulcan Mind Meld.
Oh, now I'm hungry because it reminds me of a melt. But anyways, okay, so he talks about that. But now Spock is torn about doing the mind meld with other, like, without privacy because it's only for the Vulcan people. He's never done it to humans, so he has no idea what it's going to be like.
It's never been performed by a Vulcan on a non-Vulcan, according to Spock, up until this point.
And so he makes sure the entire time he's getting Dr. Van Gilder's consent, telling him that your body's going to have a lot of things going on with your body while we do this.
He's also explaining partially to McCoy that this is not a form of hypnosis, so McCoy's not going to be affected by it. Spock is using his fingers and pressure points to physically change Dr. Van Gelder's vitals as a way to get into his brain. This is correct. It's not hypnosis. And as Star Trek continues on later, the Vulcan mind meld is used so many times. This is something that comes back again and again and becomes a very important part of Star Trek lore. It is a form of telepathy, even though that doesn't come across entirely in this instance of using it. This seems more of a physical meditation to calm Van Gelder, to get him to verbalize his thoughts and share this information with Spock and McCoy. This is a form of telepathy. Spock is experiencing, in part, Van Gelder's thoughts and memories at the same time.
Like melded together.
Exactly.
And so they're able to get the answers of what Van Gelder went through via this meld. And he even talks about it being Van Gelder should be in a euphoric state, so it should be more relaxed, which allows for the information to pass through. Then we do a hard cut back to the planet, and we are in Kirk's quarters because he's just trying to go to bed. But he summons Helen also to ask, what did you think about Kirk really wants to see the neutralizer again. He asks Helen, can you control the device? And she's confident that she can.
Yeah, and he wants to see it without Dr. Adams or any of Dr. Adams' staff present because he wants Noel to see the machine work. And as a medical professional, as the assistant, as the medical expert on this away mission, he wants Dr. Noel's unbiased opinion, and he wants so they both can observe this device working.
And he trusts her because, I mean, he literally says, I don't want my brain damaged.
Right.
So he sits in the chair, looks up at the light, and he's like, all right, let's try a light one. And Noel has it go 1 to 2 seconds. And he's like, all right, you can start whenever you want. We already did it. but your face went blank. Huh? So, all right, let's try it again. Uh, Maybe suggest something, benign.
Right, because previously Dr. Adams, we glossed over it, but Dr. Adams was saying the point of this machine was try to replace violent thoughts and violent impulses with more benign, more innocent thoughts. So in their brain at this moment, that's all that this machine does. And so naturally Kirk is saying, "Well, go ahead and implant some benign thought in me."
And she's like, "You're hungry." And then turns it off. And he's like, "I'm so hungry I can raid a kitchen."
Yeah,
And then they all laugh. Ha ha ha. So, but then he wants to know further. Try something, you know, out of the ordinary, different. And so they started again. Helen goes on about the Christmas party because they both know about that. But then she says, "You remember it differently. You sweep me off my feet. We go to your quarters,
and we have a flashback to Kirk bringing Helen into his quarters where they make out. This, I think, reveals to the viewers that even though we had the comedic moment of them having some connection at the Christmas party, I think this is to imply that nothing really happened. They just flirted and danced at the Christmas party and had a connection, but they didn't actually go back to the quarters. This also might be Helen's way of revealing that she wished it went further, but it didn't. I don't know. It's interesting that she chose this instance to use as a way to test the machine.
I thought it was kind of clever since that's something that they both experienced themselves individually together, like together, not with others. But he's smiling crazily while this is happening, and then Dr. Adams and his goons take Helen away from the controls, and he's like, "Oh, now I have you to myself." Adams to Dr. Kirk, and he just starts going.
Dr. Adams to Captain Kirk.
I wanted him to be a doctor. Oh well. Dr. Adams cranks the intensity up super high and starts to implant into Captain Kirk's brain how madly in love with Helen he is, and he'll do anything for her. And if he's not with Helen, it's unbearable pain.
And the only way to make the pain stop is if he stays and is close and is with Helen.
And after that suggestion, then Dr. Adams asks Kirk to drop this phaser. And Kirk repeats, "Must drop the phaser." He fights it, but he eventually does. Now the communicator, harder fighting, he actually gets to open the communicator where it does his little chirp chirp, but because of the pain, he actually falls out of the chair onto the floor.
Yeah,
he's dropping the communicator.
He's fighting the treatment, but I would also imagine, based on the rest of the episode and everything that we know, that this call out to the Enterprise doesn't go through because of the force field around the colony.
We cut into Kirk's quarters and we see that Helen is trying to, nurse him awake to get him to wake up, and he's, still thinks he's madly in love with her, and tries to kiss it, and she's like, "No, no, no! Remember, this is not right." And then try to remember. As he rolls away from her, she kind of like jumps back because who knows what's gonna happen. And as he's walking towards her, he sees a vent. Vents are for where the ducts are, like the air conditioning ducts. And he's like, "You could fit through here."
Yeah, because it's huge. It's human size.
So he just like pops her up in there and shuts the vent. And so she's on her way to the electricity power room so that she could turn everything off,
which would shut down the force field around the colony
and be able to contact the Enterprise and vice versa. So while she's on her mission, Dr. Adams returns
with Eli.
Yes, because obviously Captain Kirk needs more treatment. So off they go. Helen is finally in the power room, and it's like she's dancing from station to station. But she's looking for basically an off switch because she doesn't know anything about electricity. She told Kirk that. And as she's in the middle of pulling the master bar down, one of Adam's security henchmen find her and pull her away.
She does get the power off, though, in this moment.
Like a tiny moment, but
And in that tiny moment, as she is being subdued by this henchman and the power is still off, Kirk manages to break free from the neuroneutralizer because it's now powered down. He fights with Adams and Eli and manages to knock both of them out before he runs away himself.
leaving Dr. Adams in the room while Noel is lying on the floor. The henchman turns the power back on. He turns around and he like goes to her, but she tricks him and kicks him into the electricity panel where everything turns off. And that allows Spock to beam down to where that interruption happened. But meanwhile, Helen has already hopped back into the duct at this point. So Spock does not see anybody. And Spock turns everything back on.
Which, of course, turns the neuroneutralizer back on, which captures Dr. Adams in its beam. And we see a awkward, painful shot of Dr. Adams starting to be brainwashed by the neuroneutralizer.
Helen is able to get back through the ducts into Kirk's quarters. So she is safe. Then they go find Dr. Adams all alone in the neuroneutralizer room. But sadly, he's dead. He died alone with no thoughts, staring up at the light.
Right, because they realize that they put two and two together, that he's had all of his thoughts drained out of his brain and there's no one there to put those new thoughts back in to brainwash him. So it basically just drained him of everything, and someone can't survive like that.
Kind of like what Dr. Van Gelder said earlier, how it was so lonely.
Right, as his memories were being taken away. And part of why I think this treatment works so well is how unbearable that feeling of being empty in your brain is. And so you're willing to accept any of those new thoughts that someone's trying to implant in them.
And then we pop back onto the Enterprise bridge. We are happy to know that Dr. Van Gelder has destroyed that room. There's no longer the neural neutralizer. He's back in control. And Kirk and McCoy do have a little back and forth about, how can a man die from loneliness? And then they explain it that you have to kind of be there to understand it.
Yeah, it's one of the more haunting lines of Kirk saying, in response to Dr. McCoy, "Not when you've sat in that room." It's a very perfect delivery that really captures the emotion that Kirk is feeling, having gone through that treatment himself.
Like dread.
Yep. And roll credits. So, Jackie, what did you think about season 1, episode 9, Dagger of the Mind?
I actually liked it. It wasn't too weird, and it wasn't too like in your face exactly what we're doing. I liked having to think about it. I did not like Helen's short dress. It was shorter than Janice Yeoman's.
Yeah, and I really liked this episode too. As I said in the beginning, the pacing is spot on for the episode. There's not really any kind of moments where it drags out. Some of the way that the scenes are divided, Jackie mentioned she doesn't like episodes that jump back and forth between scenes too much. I think this episode is on the very verge of becoming that, but it's an intriguing story. It's iconic that it introduces the Vulcan Mind Meld, which becomes even more of a staple in Star Trek than the Vulcan nerve pinch. But yeah, overall it's a great episode. I really enjoy it. So I have some tribble tidbits or fun facts about the episode. November 3, 1966 is its first air date. The title of the episode is actually a quote from Macbeth. Morgan Woodward, who plays the character Simon Van Gelder, credits this and his other role in Star Trek. He's in another episode that's coming up later. these two roles allowed him to kind of break through this stereotype casting that he was always stuck in a rut in. He was always typecasted in Western films, and this kind of allowed him to break away from that. He really enjoyed this episode in particular. He really enjoyed playing Dr. Van Gelder. He said it was a challenging role to play, and it did require him to do some decompressing after filming, just to get out of that character's head. So he really enjoyed it.
He's like the first Miss Rachel.
Yes. Why don't you expand on that for the audience who doesn't know what you're talking about, or your co-host?
Like, he had the most wild, crazy facial expressions and grotesque looking, pain. And Miss Rachel, like, that woman has confidence out the wazoo because she has no makeup or anything on, and the camera's right in her face, doing the same thing, just teaching little kids.
No, I get it. Dr. Helen Noel's part was originally written for Yeoman Janice Rand. So we missed out an opportunity to see Janice again, but we'll get to other reasons why she was not included in this episode in a few episodes down the road. But it also made more sense to create a character that was a doctor, that had medical training and experience, to go down with Kirk to investigate the colony, rather than just have Kirk's personal administrative assistant go down with him. The bigger reason I like to imagine why we didn't see Janice in this episode.
No, that makes complete sense because poor Janice, she probably wouldn't understand.
Yeah. Again, Jaci doesn't know the character arc or the backstory to Janice Rand or the actress who plays her. We'll get to that in a couple episodes.
She just has pretty basket weave hair.
That's it. As I mentioned in the moment, this episode is the first to introduce the Vulcan Mind Meld. There's a huge history behind its creation and how it came about. There's many different versions of this script before they settled on a Vulcan Mind Meld. There is that commentary that Spock made to McCoy that this is not hypnosis, and that was added specifically because the writers and the developers of the show did not want to perpetuate that hypnosis was a valid medical treatment. They didn't want to portray that opinion. They also had that because while they didn't want to say that hypnosis was a valid medical treatment, they did believe that hypnosis was real. And so they mentioned that it is not hypnosis, and people at home would then know subconsciously that they were not going to be hypnotized with what they were about to see on the television. Again, but they didn't want to portray it as a valid medical treatment. The character named Lethe in Greek mythology is actually a river in Haiti. The mythology stated that doomed souls who drank from the river would forget their past lives. So
that's a creepy name.
Kind of on the nose for what's happening to that character and the other patients of the colony. This is the last episode that was filmed and completed before the show started airing on television. So at this point, moving forward, all episodes of Star Trek, the original series, season 1, are going to be made on a rushed production schedule where they have to film and edit and get the episode ready to produce all in a week. It was extremely tight, and it's reported that many, many, many times, and it was frequent and just part of the routine, that the network would get the finished cut of the episode literally the night before or the day of it airing.
Yikes.
The panel that distracted the transporter crew member at the very beginning of the episode was actually just an engineering panel. They specifically added it to the transporter room so that character would have something to examine, something to distract them, so Dr. Van Gelder could knock him out, and it never appears in the transporter room again. And this has a body count of 2, the henchman that is electrified and Dr. Adams himself. But those are our triple tidbits for the episode. And this is where we share our episode ranking, where we pretend that the episode is a member of our crew, and we assign it a Starfleet rank on our fictitious starship. We have a starship for each season, And a higher rank for the episode means not only we were more entertained by the episode, but we find it to be a more important member of our crew or more of a pillar episode for the season. A lower rank means we weren't that entertained by it, and we think this is a more of a disposable episode for the season and a more disposable member of our crew. We rank everything again based on Starfleet ranks, starting at the bottom with Ensign, Lieutenant Junior Grade, Lieutenant, Lieutenant Commander, Commander, Captain, and Admiral. Last week, Jaci rated Miri as an ensign, a rough translation of a 0 or 1 out of 10.
No, thank you.
Jaci, for your starship, the USS Galactic Glitter Bee, what do you rank this episode?
I'm giving this a solid commander.
So this is the first time Jaci has rated an episode as commander, an 8 or a 9 out of 10. We can also only rank 5 episodes this season as a commander. Jaci, why do you give it that ranking?
I'm giving it this ranking because it's the first one that I was able to fully watch and kind of understand the whole thing, top to bottom. I loved the acting. Like I said, the Dr. Van Gilder crazy faces all the way through. McCoy questioning Kirk. It had more substance than the others.
All right. And just as a reference to tie back to last week's episode, I also gave Miri an ensign rating. But for my ranking of this episode on my starship, the USS Cosmic Shark, we're also going to rank it a commander ranking, an 8 or a 9 out of 10. This is not the first time I've rated or ranked an episode at this. I've also ranked The Naked Time and What Are Little Girls Made Of as a commander. So this is going to be my third commander for my starship out of 5. Again, we can promote or demote episodes or crew members at will to make room, or if we change our mind later. And at the end of the season, of course, if we don't have a captain or an admiral, we will fill those spots. I gave it this ranking because of very similar reasons. Fantastic pacing, fantastic story, iconic that it introduces the Vulcan Mind Meld. I know I can't continue to give high rankings to episodes every time they introduce something new because this is the original series where literally everything is new, but the Vulcan Mind Meld is probably one of the highest reused theme or characteristic of Spock used in Star Trek and Vulcan lore in particular. So it's so important to the development of Star Trek. And again, it's got fantastic acting and it's just a really good all-around episode. So yeah, Commander is going to be my ranking.
So Spock gets over his problem with being a secretive?
The Vulcan Mind Meld becomes less part of Star Trek lore as a secretive thing that only Vulcans do. It kind of loses that aspect of it, and it becomes used more and more out in the open. One could try to argue that it's because the Vulcan species is becoming more open to sharing this ability. They don't teach other people, but it's used more and more frequently in a more variety of settings. So it does kind of never pick up as a secretive thing. This is kind of one of the few times it's ever mentioned as being secret in the Vulcan society. And it does evolve over time, the way that it's used. You don't see Spock or a Vulcan dancing around the table, readjusting the pressure points as they go. It becomes more of a meditative process. It becomes a cleaner process, I would say. Definitely is involved in some of the more memorable moments in Star Trek and certainly in Spock's character. In comparison, on IMDb, as of this recording, Dagger of the Mind is currently sitting at a 7.4 out of 10. So, pretty much a well-received episode. As a reminder, we will post an updated graphic showing our rankings to our Patreon a day after we publish the episode. So, this will come out on a Tuesday. On Wednesdays are when we post our rankings on our Patreon. We'll be back next week to trek through another episode, but this is where we give our turbolift tease or elevator pitch to the next episode's plot. I give Jaci the title of the next episode, and Jaci, with no other information, will give a brief pitch to the plot. Jaci, next week's episode is entitled The Corbormite Maneuver.
Oh, I've heard that word before, and it was fake. That was the last episode. He was tricking people. So, is this going to be a trick maneuver, or does it actually happen? Maybe he names a new maneuver, like like the pit maneuver for the cops.
I think I know what Jaci's referring to.
Yeah, because he was totally lying last episode to the quote unquote bad people that they'd have to check their carbonite or else something would be in trouble or something like that. I already forgot.
Okay, well, we'll see next week if Jaci is even close to what the plot of next week's episode is.
Never know.
But if you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast at Patreon, patreon.com/treks and tangents. As I mentioned, December 26th, we will air for our Patreon crew members the first of us breaking down and analyzing and doing a little mini episode on the original series animated series. Lighter material, shorter episodes. We'll definitely be playing around with the format and the script of the episode to fit, but should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys check it out. You can also follow us on x.com at treks_tangents. We're also on Instagram and Blue Sky at Treks and Tangents. Jaci, where can people find you and what you are up to?
I've been up to a lot of things lately. I have my normal Jaboom Instagram where you can see music, dogs, fashion, makeup, and I now have a whatnot store called Glitter Bunny Boutique. So look me up there and see what I have, and perhaps you might like some of my old treasures.
And you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv/PiratePoundTown. On YouTube, I post video games and other random content on my main channel at Pirate Pound Town. And also on YouTube, coin collecting and hobby content at Pirate Treasure Hunting. I post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town. More frequently, I'm trying to post on Instagram under Pineapple Cannibal because Instagram likes to ban pirate usernames for no reason. Well, there was a reason. I was proud of it. Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week.
See you later, and then we'll go over the melding.
End transmission.